Welcome back to the Something in the Wilderness podcast. My name's Steve, and today we are recapping our experience at the Four Chord Music Festival, which is the 10th rendition of this festival out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So today I was able to get another fan that was at the show to recap with me, which I'm very happy to introduce Connie to the show. Welcome to the show, Connie.
Thanks, Steve.
Yes, thank you so much for jumping on again. There were a lot of Andrew fans in the crowd, clearly. Actually, you and I met that day, and I kind of want to get into that story just a little bit. So why don't you start by telling listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I would love to, and also talk about how we met. I am from Pittsburgh originally, and I have been an Andrew McMahon fan since about 2006, which correlated to my freshman year of college, so that should give you an idea of my age. I definitely listened to like some of the drive-through records and Fueled by Ramen like sample CDs back in the day, but it wasn't until I hit college that like my friends I met there were really into that, as well as like Dashboard Confessional, Postal Service, Death Cab. So like it was just like a massive LimeWire download of all of these bands, right? And it was just like Everything in Transit was really the album that like hit for me. And so this was, of course, after Something Corporate had already broken up. So I was kind of listening to them in the past already at that time. But through the years, the first concert, I looked it up for completeness. The first concert I went to was a Jack's Mannequin concert in Lancaster, PA. Which we went to on a random weekday in 2008, and that was an 8-hour round-trip drive.
Wow.
just because that was, at the time, the closest place he was performing. And that was a long day, but it was great. I still remember it perfectly. It was so much fun. Even back then, he still played a couple Something Corporate songs. I looked up the set list, FM, just to see. And so since then, basically every year he's gone on a tour, I've gone to see him. In 2012, I moved to the other side of the state. So a lot of the concerts I went to were in the Philadelphia area. Okay. And ironically, as I think I mentioned to you when we met, I didn't actually see him in Pittsburgh until the 12th time I saw him. And that was the Winter in the Wilderness, like the solo acoustic tour that he did, which was actually one of my favorites. I really enjoyed the pace of that. It was around Christmas time, and it was just so magical. And it was just a very sit-down, much more casual vibe. And I will never forget that he opened with Caves. And that is such a hauntingly beautiful song. And I never thought I'd hear him perform it live because it's so personal and emotional. And just for him to walk out and sit down and start playing that was just amazing.
I've heard a few people reference that tour and the fact that he opened with Caves a couple of the shows of that tour, and how interesting that was, because that is a wild opener to me. When I saw him with just him and a piano, it was not on that tour. It was just a solo show in Indianapolis last summer, almost exactly a year ago, actually.
Oh, nice.
Probably a year ago from Four Chord. That was super special, but I've never seen Caves just on a piano, so that would have been really interesting.
I loved it. It was amazing. Again, not an exciting song in the sense of what we're going to talk about for Something Corporate, but just beautiful to see. Yeah. So like I said, every year I've pretty much seen him. I also have gotten involved with Dear Jack through the years, as I'm sure most of us have to some degree.
Oh, cool.
And one of the things I have been doing since the pandemic, since I went to the drive-in show, is the Letters with Love. And I really enjoy participating in that. So I know there's a lot of fans, and I don't know how many people do that, but I like to encourage people to do it because it's a really nice way to give back and be a part of the community.
Well, thanks for mentioning that, because that actually reminded me when I was in Milwaukee a few weeks back for the Holiday from Real Beer release at Mobcraft Brewing. The organizer of that event, she represents a Dear Jack Foundation fundraising team. It's Lisa from Llama Lifters.
Yes.
And she actually had those out for us to fill out. So everybody at my table made a couple of them, and that was really cool. That was my first experience with that, so it was neat.
Well, and actually this is very timely. Wasn't planning on fully plugging this, but I just got an email from Dear Jack, or from Susan specifically from Dear Jack, that the next letter writing campaign is the end of July, beginning of August is when they're going to do the Zooms. And you don't have to do the Zooms to do it, but you get more information on the people participating. So just this little plug.
Okay. If you're not on that email list, how do you get on it? Do you just go to dearjackfoundation.com and sign up for the email? Okay.
It's dearjackfoundation.com, and then I think it's under Get Involved, and then there's like an option for Letters with Love. And since they just sent about the letter writing parties, if you click any of the dates, you can just basically put in your name and email address, and it sends you like a Zoom meeting invite. Pretty easy.
Gotcha. Thanks for the info. Yeah, I haven't been directly involved with that aspect of it in the past. Let's talk about shows. So in general, when you found Jack's Mannequin initially, was it like friends from college that you'd go to shows with specifically, or was it just kind of like anybody?
So I would say the first couple ones were friends from college, and then my sister has tagged along with several of those. She's a little more into more of the emo scene from that day, but we support each other. We support each other's musical taste similarly. Mm-hmm. And then in my adult life, I just met other friends that had the same interests, which was great. I have one of those friends, which we'll get at the end, going on the cruise, mm-hmm. and another friend from growing up. But a lot of them ended up being solo because sometimes it's hard to find people who want to go to shows with you.
I can completely relate to that. So you don't always have an Andrew McMahon friend available. So sometimes you got to go it alone and make new friends at the shows.
As Four Chord showed us. But that's, one of the great things is, like I said, a lot of people in my life, coworkers, other friends now, don't really know Andrew McMahon. But the fans that he has are so passionate about his music and his work. And that's what also makes going to his concerts so great, is you're not actually going to be alone, even though you're solo.
Absolutely. Especially when you're sitting in that crowd, which we will definitely be talking about what it felt like to be in that crowd that night with everybody singing along. So it's kind of a core memory for me of that show that we'll get to. And it's still kind of the feeling still within me. So it's like a great time to talk about this show.
Absolutely.
So let's talk first about the last year's Four Chord experience, because you and I were both there separately, of course, but I knew you were there, and we talked about it at this year. So tell me a little bit about your Four Chord experience in 2023, if you don't mind revisiting the trauma of it.
Oh, yeah, I can revisit it quickly. And just, I guess, so that people are aware, because I am a Pittsburgh native that moved away and came back, just so they understand what Four Chord is. So this was their 10th year of doing this festival. So it happened after I moved away. So I wasn't super familiar with it. But it is a Pittsburgh local production. So it's not Live Nation. It's not Ticketmaster. It's not some third-party production. So that's what their big hype is that they produce this all locally, and it's the punk pop, punk rock scene that they are able to bring these bands in, and they try and do a balance between local bands and nationally known bands. So in 2023, I had since moved back to Pittsburgh. So, I saw that Andrew was going to be performing, as well as I think the other acts that evening were Taking Back Sunday and Yellow Card were the two big headliners, which I've never seen Taking Back Sunday, still haven't. And I actually ended up going to see Yellow Card in Cuyahoga Falls. So worked out, but I was like, it's here, let's do it. That day, there was some heavy rain predictions this in 2023. Yep. And I know you were traveling from afar, so, once you make the decision to drive, you're committed. For me, right. I was a little bit closer, so I was like, well, let me wait and see what the weather's going to be. So I ended up getting there much later in the day than when you were there, and parking was kind of a nightmare getting there that late. Oh. So that was my first big problem. I basically parked my car pretty illegally. And then basically by the time I got there, got through, figured it out, I think I tried to message you on Facebook
Yeah, because we had connected through the We Are the Pop Underground Facebook group, and
Yes.
just kind of like
Yeah.
people were saying, "Hey, who's all going to be at Four Chord?" And we were two of those people, and so I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, we'll meet up with you." And I remember trying to like send messages saying, "We're over here," and I don't think you were getting them. And then I would get a message later that like, "Oh, I just got your message. I'm over here." And so we were able to meet up with a couple fans, but you and I never met up that
We
day.
never met up. We never met up. And then it was pretty much right before when Andrew's set was supposed to start.
Yep.
They called not just lightning, but a tornado warning.
Mm-hmm.
So they, made everybody clear. And this was at a minor league ballpark stadium, about a half an hour south of Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Okay.
So there were places to take cover, which was great. But I hung in the dugout for about over an hour. But I think where everything kind of fell apart with the festival was there was no announcements about what was happening as far as was the concert continuing, was the weather too bad to leave, and just again, so everyone knows, a tornado did touch down in the area, so
Mm-hmm.
it was real, it was legit, but they just didn't really tell us any of that. And then the internet connection was quite poor, at least on my end. So
Mm-hmm.
I was not able to get online to see the weather, the radar, get on Instagram to see if there were updates, to get on Facebook to see if you messaged me, anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I eventually, at, I don't know, 10 something, just called it for myself and said, this is a bust. I'm going home. And then as I'm about halfway back home, I'm able to get on Instagram and I see that Andrew is at a random Mexican restaurant. And that's where you come into the story.
You are not the only one who left. I don't know if most, but a lot of people left. My friend Chris from the High School Never Ends podcast left. You left, and then a couple of other Andrew fans we knew through where we met through the We Are the Pop Underground Facebook group we were able to meet up with. They left too. They were in exactly the same boat you were, whereas there was no communication, there was no messages going through, lack of internet, and they were from Florida. So they were like, I guess we're going back to our hotel and, got an Uber or whatever because they didn't have a way to get anywhere. So we met some people at this year's Four Chord that also said the same thing. We were like, yeah, we just assumed it was over and left.
Yeah, exactly.
But unfortunately, for those that did leave, they did reopen the show, and Yellow Card came out and played like 6 or 7 songs, and they apologized right away. They were like, we're not going to be able to play the whole Ocean Avenue album as we had expected, as we promised. Oh, but before that was Taking Back Sunday. They played like 5 or 6 acoustic songs. And I think the drummer was not on stage. And I heard from somebody, I don't know if this is a rumor, that the drummer left the show as well. Maybe for a similar reason, just like, oh, it's over, or didn't know anything, or was like, I'm getting out of here. I don't know. But apparently their drummer left. And so they just did an acoustic show, which was kind of interesting. But I'm not being a huge Taking Back Sunday fan. I didn't really know what to expect from their set anyway. But yeah, it was an unfortunate series of events for a lot of people. I found myself in a lucky position, but most people kind of got screwed on that one as fans. So I do feel badly about that. Which leads us to this year. When you went to buy tickets, was that heavily on your mind when you were like, oh, Four Chord 2024, something corporate will be there? Were you like thinking back to last year's experience now?
Yeah, so with Four Chord 2024, I was like, I'm never going to this festival again.
Right.
And then they announced that something corporate was going to be there, and I was like, well, it's like the meme, like I'm ready to get hurt again. Like let's just do this all over. So like definitely anxiety about it. The other big thing again being from Pittsburgh, the venue is pretty new to Pittsburgh as a concert venue of that magnitude. So it was at the Carey Furnace, which again, just to set the scene, is kind of what it sounds like. It's an old steel mill that they have maintained the structure of it in large part and use it for various events when they do tours, and sometimes I think they do like glass blowing classes and a few other things there, but to my knowledge, they've never done something quite like this at that venue. And it's also, so like, I read too an article, like they wanted to bring it back to Pittsburgh, and this is in Pittsburgh city limits as opposed to the Wild Things Stadium that's in Washington, PA. And I guess they've been trying for a while, but with it being the 10th anniversary, a decade, they kind of wanted to make it special in that sense. And I just wasn't sure about the location, the infrastructure, all of that stuff going into it. And I don't know what you were thinking, again, coming from further away, and thoughts on that.
I saw the venue, you know, I GPS'd it or Google mapped it, whatever, on my computer when they first announced it, because I was immediately looking for Airbnbs in the area when I found out it was happening and where it was happening. And I was like, oh, that's a weird spot. You know, what's around there? Okay, not a whole lot is around there, but also that it's an industrial factory, like what looked to be an abandoned factory. But on the other hand, I saw pictures of an event that had taken place there, and I was like, okay, that looks pretty cool. But I also, in the back of my mind, was thinking, but it's on an industrial site, like an old, you said steel mill. I didn't know what it was supposed to be, but that makes sense being Pittsburgh. Yeah, but looking at pictures, I was like, okay, this is odd. And as it turned out, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they were using any of the actual structures for any part of the concert. It was just kind of around the structures, on the grounds of it, if you will. Is that right?
I believe so. I don't know if there was a part that they were using to maybe house the musicians indoors.
Oh, possibly. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Everything else, it was just kind of a backdrop to the festival, as opposed to us inside of any of the industrial building.
But overall, I thought it was an odd choice. And coming from out of town, especially the south of Pittsburgh, I drive from south into Pittsburgh. I was like, oh man, that's going to be not only further from me, but I kind of liked even though you had a bad experience with parking last year, I liked the parking arrangement. It was really easy to get in and out of in the morning, or in and into it in the morning and then out of at night, fairly easy at night. And there was just a lot of space to move. And I liked the venue. I liked Washington Wild Things Park. You know, it wasn't cool or whatever for a concert, but it was logistically sound, you know, like it made sense.
Yeah, it's definitely functional, right?
Yeah,
like
functional.
It's set up, so it has the infrastructure. It's set up to house people in mass. So, you know, that part of it makes sense for sure.
Yeah. And I don't know if besides Carrie Furnace, Pittsburgh has any other festival grounds type of places that they could set up 2 stages and all those tents, because there are a lot of vendors and things, and they do like to space things out. They did do a good job with that this year as well, where they spaced things out really well, so there's plenty of room to move. You didn't feel like trapped in anywhere like I felt at other festivals, such as When We Were Young, where you're feeling like you're kind of enclosed into somewhere. But there was just a lot of room to go in and out, in my opinion, even at Carrie Furnace.
I think they did a good job with the setup. And then also, like, they had a lot of porta potties set up, which was, you know, that's something to consider when you have people. Oh, they had the food separated. They had, like, a vendor village area. And then, of course, getting us water at the last minute kind of setup was nice, too, because you don't always get that with a festival.
Yeah, definitely essential for the water, because we were hearing 2 different things majorly about the weather going into it. We were hearing, oh, it's so hot and humid there, but also these huge storms are expected.
Yeah.
we were looking down the barrel of yet another potential cancellation this year going into it. So were you once again anxious on, say, Saturday or Saturday night? Because I know neither you nor I went to the Saturday, day 1 of Four Chord.
Yeah.
So we probably both were online reading the things about what happened that night, which nothing terrible, but just like people were complaining about some things at the festival.
Yeah, nothing terrible. People always tend to highlight the bad, right?
Right.
And so I think, you know, the 2 big things other than the weather was the heat and the unavoidableness of the heat with that venue. There was 1 tree and just very little options for shade. And even though they provided water, it sounded like there were enough people that got some heat exhaustion. And then the dust and just the dirtiness, with maybe it being that old industrial area. People were saying that they were coughing up black. They blew their nose. It was black. Reports to like bring a mask, bring a bandana, and then the traffic getting out, because it was like a one way in, one way out kind of situation.
Yeah. As everything in Pittsburgh seems to be.
Yes, exactly.
I actually chose to use the shuttle lot, which was at some mini mall, like with a Lowe's and some other, things like a grocery store. Parked there, got on a shuttle, and they brought me over, which I was a little nervous about leaving at night because I kind of heard the horror stories from Saturday about people getting out of the show on the shuttles. But I chanced it anyway, saved the $30 in parking. I thought I might get stuck in traffic down there, in or out. So I was like, I'll just try the shuttle and see what happens. And for the most part, that went well. Like the shuttling, I will say, was much better than I anticipated. When you look at the road that goes over, there's only one road that goes down there. Yep. It was so weird.
Just a straight up dead end, because it's just an old industrial area that there's no other reason to go there. So
right. So we had some potential weather issues. We kind of knew what to expect, that somewhere between like 5 and 9 o'clock, there was going to be either a storm or at least some heavy rains. I got to admit, the night before, I heavily considered not going. I was like, I have this ticket, and I have an Airbnb booked that I can't cancel anymore, but I'd also be driving 6 hours if you consider round trip, plus staying overnight, being away from my family for the day and the night, and half the next day. I was like, there was a lot to consider. So was I losing the money? And my wife was like, you're going to be really disappointed if you stay home and the show goes on and you're sitting at home and you're like, something corporate's playing on stage right now.
Right.
And I was like, you're right. So ultimately, that's why I went, because my wife was like, well, you already have the ticket and the Airbnb, and you're going to be so upset with yourself if you don't just go. So I did get in the car hesitantly, and even the whole morning I was like, should I go? Should I turn around? Should I go home? Like it's looking terrible. The weather's looking terrible. But spoiler alert, and I'm sure everybody knows this by now, but I'm so glad I went, because everything turned out okay, if not great. So going into the show, I don't know what time you arrived exactly, but were there other artists that you intended to see, or you were looking forward to seeing, I'll say?
So I ended up getting there around 3-ish, not long after, or not long before I saw you. But I was interested in like the latter half of the lineup.
Same.
Basically, yep. Old Neon is like a local pop punk band, and they give me Fall Out Boy vibes, and if they weren't the first act of the morning, I probably would have come for them too, but it was just like a lot of hours to stand around by myself. So I was like, let's budget for like a 3 o'clock arrival, and then I'll definitely have enough buffer to see everybody I wanted. So, Taylor Acorn, she was great. Solid performance. Really enjoyed her. Reliant K, and then, Motion City Soundtrack is one that I like, but we made the sacrifice which we'll get into, to get in the front-ish of the other stage, because unfortunately with the way they flip-flop the stages, Motion City was immediately...
Yep, they were immediately before something corporate. There was the threat of them getting delayed. Or they did get delayed. Actually, their set did get delayed for weather.
Yeah. It was like...
The weather that we are standing in.
The weather, yep. So those were basically all of mine, and I think we had pretty similar. And then the All-American Rejects, which, we're all about something corporate, but the All-American Rejects did end the night, so.
Yeah. I was able to check out some of those early bands, like Old Neon. They were pretty good. Maybe they were great, but I wasn't paying as close of attention as I could have been, because I was talking to somebody during for the majority of that set. But what I heard sounded good. In fact, I'll just say it. I didn't hear a band that I disliked the entire day, which is kind of what I've come to expect from Four Chord. This is my third year attending, and I don't catch every set. If I catch parts of sets, but usually I like what I hear. The sound is good. They get good bands, whether you mentioned the local acts that they get, and then a lot of national acts, of course. They do a really good job finding great bands. And it's amazing that there's that many local Pittsburgh pop punk specifically, or punk specifically, bands that come out to play and are willing to come out and play this show each year. There's a couple of regulars, and Old Neon might be one of them. They may have been on the bill last year.
I think so, yeah.
But I did catch Don't Panic's entire set, and that was very good. I was impressed.
Okay.
It's hard to impress me or please me from a band when I've never ever heard their music before, but I was really into it. I was like, yeah, this is good stuff. There was other bands I didn't really pay as much attention to because like we got to talking and we'll come back around to that. But and then I was talking to some other people, but like Goalkeeper and House Parties and People Are Ugly and Keep Flying, all those bands I kind of heard parts of, saw parts of, kind of back in the distance. But who I was really there for, who I paid money to see, was obviously, besides something corporate, it was Taylor Acorn, who I just recently got into. I think a lot of people are feeling the same way about her. Most people I've talked to anyway are like, yeah, she's pretty impressive. She sounds good on her album, and she puts on a good live show. I'm hearing that from a lot of people. So I'm glad to hear that for her. Reliant K is another favorite of mine on the bill. And then I was also there to see All American Rejects. And honestly, the Get Up Kids, I wasn't a huge fan of before. They're a band that I always feel like I'm supposed to be into because I like that era of emo and punk music, but I never got deep into them. I think I had a burned copy of the album that they did a playthrough of. I think it might have been a different album altogether. And I gave it a few listens in the early 2000s, and I was like, yeah, this is fine. And I'd forgotten about it. But when I saw they were doing that album playthrough, I mentioned it to a few friends who are into them, and they're like, oh my gosh, well, you have to see them. You absolutely have to see them. They're performing that album that's like monumental. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll listen to the Get Up Kids. I'll listen to that album specifically, Something to Write Home About. And after like I'd say 5 or 6 listens through over weeks or months of time, I actually did start to like it. So I was really glad that I got to see that, which I'll come back around to that. But so I was kind of anticipating that a little bit. And then Motion City Soundtrack, kind of similarly, I'm not a huge fan of, but I was like, yeah, I would watch that, sure. I like some of their songs, and it'd be cool to see them again. I got to see them last year when we were young. And All American Rejects, I'm a longtime fan of, probably like a lot of us who grew up in that era, so to speak. You know, I like All American Rejects, not only their radio hits, but have all their albums, and was really looking forward to them as well.
Yeah. There's just like a fun nostalgia with them, and they're kind of like a modern classic, right? Like I feel like you can't go wrong with their music, and I felt the same as you with the Get Up Kids. They're a band I feel like I should have known their music, but for some reason I just didn't. And so seeing that album performed like cover to cover, and they squeezed it all in, was like really, really cool. I'm glad I got to experience that too.
Like a couple of my friends said, it was like, wow, hardcore Get Up Kids fans would really want to see that. And I was looking around, and I was glad to see there was a lot of people into it. And that seemed to be the case. I think people that go to this festival seem to be just really into this style of music and open to hearing these other bands, which I think is an important quality. And it's something that makes me prefer festivals that are more genre specific. And I realized that this past year. I liked When We Were Young for that reason. I've liked Four Chord for the last few years. I don't think I would like one of those festivals, and truth be told, I haven't been to one of those kind of festivals in a long time, where it's like every genre in the entire world on one bill.
Like Bonnaroo or... Yeah,
like Bonnaroo. There was one called Bunbury in Cincinnati for a few years.
Okay.
It no longer exists, but I kind of go to concerts to see artists that I like, not necessarily to find new artists, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. I agree with you. And I do think like one thing Four Chord does have going for it is that they are true to the genre, try to keep the bands and the energy, and even with the 2 days, right? Because we didn't go on Saturday. Uh-huh. And I think the energy Saturday was a little bit harder.
Yeah, it
was.
And
that's not exactly my vibe. And so the energy on Sunday with, something corporate and All American Rejects kind of being the bigger headliners, it even fits the subgenre of the genre better. So I have to admit they did a great job with the lineup itself.
Yeah, I did appreciate that as well. In having to make the tough decision on whether to go both days or one day, it made it much easier for me to decide, okay, I'm just going to go to the one day because I can catch several artists that I really enjoy in the one day.
I agree.
So when you arrived at 3:00, you saw me. I posted my T-shirt, which was like live from the old Mexico. And I said, hey, if anybody can look for me. And I was really glad that you came up and said hello, and a few people did. And, you know, so often I will either post on We're the Pop Underground or someone else will, or like people will be like, let's meet up at the concert, let's have a get together. And it usually doesn't work out. I have found that people are very particular, and I could probably say the same about myself, are very particular in their concert habits. And so you've got the barricade people, you know, I'm going to stand in line all day or for several hours. You've got the people who, you know, kind of want to hang out in the back, but you've got the people who want to go to dinner right before the concert. And so it's just, and then you've got people who are meeting up with, you know, other people or whatever.
Right.
It's just, it seems really varied in to the degree of like how you get people together before a show. Because I've tried to organize get-togethers of Andrew fans before a show, and it's like impossible unless you already know them. So I was really glad that you came up and said hi. So thank you for doing that. And it was cool because, like you said, we were kind of there for some of the same artists, for a lot of the same artists. So it really worked out well. And then shortly after you came up to me, or maybe it's when you came up to me, I was also kind of similarly meeting up with the guys from High School Never Ends podcast, a podcast that I've been on twice, and they've been on this show twice, but we had never met in person. So, because one of them's from Philly, one's from Pittsburgh, and they were with some friends of theirs, but that was cool too. So we kind of all got together at right around the same time while some of the bands were playing. I was really glad to kind of come together with a bunch of other fans who were excited about the show like I was.
Yeah, it was really nice. It was nice to meet you. You know, with the Old Mexico shirt, you were easy to find. And again, thank you for welcoming me. And yeah, it was nice to talk with those guys as well and get their take. And they went to the Friday night show, so we got to hear a little bit about the pre-show party.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
what was that?
Red jumpsuit apparatus.
And the emo band. So
yeah.
We kind of got to get a little bit of a recap on that, too. So that was cool.
Yeah, I actually forgot that they went to that. That's right. And they were at day one as well, or some of them were. Yeah, so then we met up with some other fans as well, Zoe, Ari, and Sarah, and talked to them for just a little bit. And then some random dude came up and wanted to play hacky sack. That was interesting.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about the hacky sack guy.
That was so random. Like, we were standing in a circle talking about, you know, what we were excited about, you know, oh, something corporate tonight, what's the weather going to do, you know, all these topics. And then this guy walks up and he's like, hey, you guys want to play hacky sack? And we all just kind of stopped and looked at him. He's like, well, you're already in a circle, so let's play some hacky sack. And he just like threw it and started kicking it, not aggressively at all. Like that kind of came out like he kicked it at us, but no, he was like very friendly. And we're like, okay, so we kind of played for a few minutes, and we're like, okay, cool. Well, we better get going.
Yeah.
And legitimately, we were like, we got things to do. Like, there's a concert going on right here that we want to go enjoy too.
Exactly.
And I know you and I had made plans. We're like, all right, we need to get water, use the bathroom, and then get to the stage before Taylor Acorn starts. So we had like, you know, a limited time. So we like said goodbye to the other people we had met, and then went and did that. And then something caught your eye after we got some water.
Yeah. So, you know, we got the water, and smart planning, the bathrooms and the water were on opposite ends of the festival grounds from each other. And Taylor Acorn had started, so we were rounding the bend, and I can't remember, commented that she started and she was sounding good, and should we get over there? And then I said, yeah, but wait a minute. I see some blonde hair in the dunk tank. I think that's Andrew getting dunked right now.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was.
Yeah, he was in the dunk tank as we walked around the bend, and there was a bunch of people, and I think that's what I noticed first. I don't know if you quite caught that or caught him first, but like what I noticed while you were noticing that is that there's a bunch of people watching. Like, something's going on here. They were watching Andrew get dunked in the dunk tank, and just so everybody knows, it was for. Did you catch the name of the charity? It was for a charity.
I
organization.
didn't. It was some sort of like bulldog charity, like an animal rescue type thing, but I meant to look up the name and I didn't.
That's okay. It was Bullies or something. Josh was wearing a shirt during the Something Corporate set later on that night. So that's the only reason I know Bullies was in the name. But if you're interested, it probably wouldn't be too hard to find the name of that organization. So they were doing this because people were giving that organization money to buy softballs to throw at the dunk tank to try to dunk Andrew. So it was a really nice thing that the band was doing. Brian, the drummer, was out there. Josh was out there, which we didn't notice until a few minutes later. They were all going to do it, but they were all doing it for charity. So I thought that was really cool of them.
It was very cool. I feel like not a lot of bands would be willing to do that, and especially for like most of the band to get up there and do it is very cool. And and then we were able to meet and get some pictures, so that was great.
I think I caught Josh off guard because we were on the side with not as many people because we were standing right in front of the organization's tent, and he came over to actually kind of talk to them. I was like, "Hey, Josh," and he's like, "Oh, hey." And I told him who I was because he and I, met on Zoom last fall. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, I don't know if he remembered me or not, but I'd like to think he did, but I don't know." So we took a quick picture, and we snapped a picture of all three of us just because I didn't want to take up too much of his time. So I didn't want to go through the, let's get a picture of me. Now let's get a picture of you. So hopefully that was okay that we just got a picture of all three of us together. But
very cool.
Actually, I was going to say I'll post that on Instagram. I think I already have posted that on Instagram. But that was kind of a cool moment. Just like, there was no crowd, there was no hoopla. It was just like he was just hanging out at the tent after he got dunked. And so he probably wasn't in the state where he wanted to meet a whole lot of people, but he was very gracious with us. And he was like, "Oh, sure." He's such a friendly dude. So
yeah, it was very cool because, everyone, and then of course the crowd was all around Andrew. But, it's nice to show some of the other band members some love and too. So, and then Andrew, of course, had a large crowd, but we snuck our way in.
Yeah, somehow, I don't know. We kind of again walked up from the side, and some of the people we had met earlier were already standing with him, like taking pictures, and they were so he was kind of doing his thing where he was taking pictures, and there wasn't a whole lot of time, so we had to shoot the pictures pretty quick. And but I did appreciate that they liked my shirt. Like his manager was standing next to him, and he's like, "Oh, I love the shirt," because it said "Live at the Old Mexico 2023." And then Andrew was like, "Oh yeah, man," and gave me and I was like, "Are we going tonight, Andrew?" And he gave me a high five. So that was fun. But we snapped a couple of quick pics and then let him move on because we just caught him in time because he was about to, his manager was like, "All right, we got to go." Whereas I'm sure he would have stayed there all afternoon taking pictures. That's just the kind of person he is.
I agree.
Then we did head over to watch the rest of Taylor Acorn's set. So we had to sacrifice a little. Again, that's the thing of the day, kind of like Motion City soundtrack that we'll come back to here. We did have to sacrifice. We couldn't exactly go watch Taylor Acorn because we were meeting Josh and Andrew in the crowd. So, but that was like a really very random moment. I mean, we could have been on the other side of that tent and never known that was happening. So it was just all in the timing. It was like perfect timing.
It was perfect timing because there was definitely no schedule for who was getting dunked that I knew of, and so it just happened how it happened.
Yeah, so I felt pretty fortunate, but that was a pretty fun little moment out there. So. But yeah, we watched Taylor Acorn about half her set, if not maybe more than half her set. Did you enjoy her set like you thought you would?
I did. I enjoy her energy. She has really good energy. It's nice to see like a female pop punk type singer that is newer, like out in the world. And I it's like you said, I think I see her stuff on YouTube or on Instagram, and it looks really good. She sounds great, but in person, she sounded just as good.
I agree. Yeah, she has a lot of energy, moving around the stage a lot. I liked her band, and I like her songs. There's I've listened to the whole album through several times, and there's some that really caught my ear. And I feel like she played all the songs I knew. Was that when it stormed? I can't. Oh no, Relient K was up next, right?
K, yeah, they started, and then it started to storm. So they started their set. I can't remember what one of the good ones from.
Well, they played High of 75. I know that because he talks about storms, and which was just a little bit of a coincidence there.
So about halfway, but that was the big one, right? Halfway between Relient K's set was when it stormed, and they called lightning.
Yeah, I was really enjoying their set. Relient K had to be, I would say, second on my list after Something Corporate for ones I was excited to see that day. In fact, they played in Columbus the night before, and I opted not to go. And I'm still okay with that decision. I was like, well, I'll see them on Sunday. There was another thing going on that night that I wanted to go to, but their set did get cut short, and then we missed some of it because of the weather. But what we saw, I really enjoyed. They played at least 3 songs from which is one of my favorite albums of all time, actually. And I go back to that album pretty regularly. But it kind of left me feeling like I need to go see them again now, even though I chose not to go on Saturday night to see their full set in Columbus. But I kind of feel like now I have to go see them again sometime. I did get to catch their set at When We Were Young last fall, so that was pretty cool. I was really glad I saw their whole set there. That one was definitely a priority on my list out of all the bands that were playing there. So I am glad we got to see, like, well, what would you say? We saw like 5 other songs before they got delayed?
Yeah, I think like 5 or 6 songs before the delay. And, I felt the same. Like, I've never seen them before, and they were, another one of those bands that came out and had a very definitive role in my musical, like, upbringing in, the early 2000s. So it was just very nostalgically cool to see them at least perform some of it. But similar to you, I kind of feel like I need to see them again to get the full experience.
When they made that announcement, I know Andrew McMahon fans like us, hearts were crushed, especially after last year, that we were like, oh no, it's happening again. It's getting canceled. But this was just a rainstorm. It was lightning, but wow, it was pouring outside. I took some video and I looked at it afterward, and someone that saw the video was like, was it snowing? And I was like, no, those were huge raindrops. I don't know. They were ginormous raindrops.
I mean, it poured. When it rained, it poured. And then it was like the sun came out. And you're like, okay, this is going to be fine. We had to leave the stages because of the lightning as well.
Oh, right. They told us we had to get away from the stages. Yeah. That's right.
So we took shelter under the already too crowded Monster Energy tent.
Right. Side note, who was giving away Monster Energy drinks, I found out earlier in the day. I made the mistake of having some of one of them. I was like, oh, it's free. I'll try it. And I was like, oh, I remember why I don't do energy drinks. This is a terrible idea. I don't like the way they make me feel. Ironically, I do coffee, but for some reason, energy drinks, I don't know if it's the sugar or like the intense caffeine intake all at once, but it didn't go down very well. I was like, okay. So I ended up throwing most of it away. But yeah, but their shelter was great.
Shelter was great.
Ironically, I used their shelter to get out of the sun earlier in the day, and now I was using it to get out of the rain.
So, it served multiple purposes for you in that way.
And I did feel badly, and I remember feeling this way last year for those barricade people who camp out all day at the barricade. They make it a point, they're like, I need to be front row for my favorite artist later in the day, so I'm going to hang out by the barricade all day. And I knew one of them, Cody, who I met last year at Four Chord, was one of them. They made them all of them get away from the barricade and away from the stage, so they had to abandon their spot. So those people kind of stood, I don't know, as close as they could, so let's say 100 feet back or whatever, where the security guard made them stand. And they were ready, chomping at the bit, ready for them to call it so they could run back to their spot, which they did. But it's funny, we walked up kind of into that same crowd, those barricade people, I'll say. And when they called it, when they said, all right, you can go back, people just rushed for the stage. And we looked at each other, we're like, should we just go then? Sure.
Yeah.
and so we joined them, and we got pretty close.
We were like 3 or 4 rows of people back, which is great for me, for my purposes. I don't have to be first. I don't have to be at the barricade, especially for what that means for like the whole day being dedicated. But it was especially, again, because we were then dedicated to being there through the rest of Reliant K, finishing their set, which was now abridged, and then the Get Up Kids full act, and then, of course, seeing Motion City soundtrack, but still being able to hear them, but then being very front and center. I mean, we were pretty much center as well with where they put the piano, so that was great.
Yeah, we were not off to the side whatsoever. So we had, I would say, a just about perfect view of both the Get Up Kids and Something Corporate. Oh, and All American Rejects eventually.
Yes.
So it was a good spot. And the crowd wasn't that tightly packed. In fact, so my friends Stephanie and Stewie were there as well. And I had met up with them earlier in the day, just kind of hanging out. That's who I was talking to during the first band of the day. And then also hung out with them a little bit late in the afternoon, right before I met you. And so I was texting with Stephanie and I said, hey, you should join us up here. We're really close and the crowd's kind of loose and I think you can walk right up. I will admit, I would feel badly about that if she was a 6-foot tall person and she was blocking someone's view. But she came right up and she got right in there and didn't block a single person's view behind her. So
Right.
I got to say, I didn't do this intentionally. It just really worked out in my favor. But there were shorter people than me in front of me the whole time. So therefore, I had no problem seeing. So I felt really lucky because honestly, for a slight bit shorter than average guy, that's kind of the strategy. It's like, well, if I can stand behind someone just a little bit shorter than me, then that kind of works out. So I had a great view as well. I hope you did too. I hope you were able to see well.
Oh yeah, actually, everyone in front of me was shorter than me too, just about. And or if not, I had like a perfect little window between. So yeah, it worked out great.
Yeah, there was a nice couple just to our left, and they're very nice, but he was taller, so if he would have been standing in front of me, I would have been screwed. But fortunately, he was standing just behind me, so he could see fine and I could see fine. Yeah, the rain did come back and poured on us during Get Up Kids, and I felt so bad for the people without raincoats, and it was just massively pouring on us for what seemed like forever. It couldn't have been that long. But when you're standing in just pouring rain, it feels like a long time.
And this time it was just rain, so there was no lightning. So they didn't tell us we had to leave the barricade or by the stage. So everyone just kind of stood their ground and stood there miserably in the rain. But it was really cute. I had an umbrella and a poncho, so I busted out the umbrella, and everyone that we met in our little section there kind of crowded under it. Stephanie used it to keep her glasses clean.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Her glasses were, she couldn't see out of her glasses. That's
and,
right.
everyone, this is what I love about concerts. It's like you just have common ground. In that moment, everyone is just there to brave it out for the next set. And that next set was, something corporate. And we were just all ready to go for it. So
people were very kind in that audience. I feel like everybody, not everybody, but there was a bunch of people just kind of talking to each other in between sets. And that was really cool to see. And like you said, just kind of that support where the umbrella and like some people were, holding up their raincoats. And I know there was a girl, Olivia, next to you that was worried about her phone and some other things that she had, but and she kind of had them all wrapped in plastic, was worried. I don't know if she'd bought merch or something, but it seemed like she was trying to keep something wrapped in plastic, keep it safe, because it was really dumping buckets on us for a while. But one of my great memories from the day, I don't know if it's great, just very vivid memories, I'll say, is watching the Get Up Kids perform that album, Something to Write Home About. And again, I'm somewhat familiar with the album. I knew the songs. I think I became a fan that day, by the way. I really enjoyed it, but I think it was part of the vibe, the whole again, the communal aspect that you mentioned of just kind of everybody being together and being supportive of each other, but just all we're in this together now. We're sharing this moment. Some of it's good, some of it's terrible, but we're sharing this moment together, all of us. And I think that's kind of what I remember about that set. And I was looking at the looks on the faces of some of the band members up there of the Get Up Kids, and they were looking out at I cannot believe these people are standing out here in the pouring rain watching our set. And they were the guys up front were getting wet too.
Oh yeah.
They seem to be enjoying the fact that, we are all still into it. We are all still enjoying it. Like I mentioned earlier, I feel like a lot of people in the crowd were into it. I took a little snippet of video of that as well, just because I wanted to remember what that looked like with everybody getting dumped rain on, but still enjoying a concert and for the concert happening in front of them. I just thought that was such a cool thing.
It's very cool. And that's what it's all about. And that's what I love with the energy of concerts like that.
Yeah, I got to say the rain did really put a stop to all the dust that was in the air earlier on the day.
That is the silver lining, is there was no more dust, although my feet were already done for by that point. But
oh my gosh, my feet were my feet might as well have been underwater for the remainder of the night after that point.
It's like my feet are never gonna be dry again, is what I felt like. I'm like, they're just wet forever now. But you suffer for art,
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, so in between that, the Get Up Kids and then Motion City Soundtrack. Motion City Soundtrack was delayed, and then, though we could hear it just fine, we were like, not within view at all because we were up next to the other stage. So I like the setup. It's like a Warped Tour setup from the days of old, but it's also, it takes planning and sacrifice. If you really want to be up close for the artist you came to see, then you have to miss the one before or right after being up close, at least for it. So it was important to me. I'm not a barricade person necessarily. I'm not even a upfront person necessarily, but I saw an opportunity to be up close and I jumped on it, and the sacrifice was Motion City Soundtrack. So in general, are you an up close person at a concert? Do you like to be closer to the stage?
It depends on the concert. I never have to be a front row person, but sometimes it depends on the band, but sometimes I like the energy of being up close. And sometimes I'm better just to hang back where the crowd starts to thin, because sometimes craning your neck up to watch is a lot, and when you're a little bit further back, you can just enjoy it from a comfortable distance. So it really just depends on what I'm feeling, how socially be around a lot of people, or I want to be able to float. But for this one, I was with you, as we said, I didn't have to be front row, but I kind of did want to be as close as I could get. So it really did work out with this.
Yeah, it was cool to be around a bunch of other passionate Something Corporate fans, like the women we had met up with earlier were right there, and Stephanie joining us, and then Olivia that was next to us, and then that couple behind us, I didn't catch their names. And there was another girl that you were talking to for a while as well who was really friendly.
Oh, yeah. I didn't catch her name either.
Big Andrew and All American Rejects fan. Just a bunch of it's exciting to be in the crowd with a bunch of other very excited fans. But yeah, I feel similarly. There's some times that I will just stand in the back and be perfectly okay with that. I don't know what I'm going to do at the other SoCo shows I go to this year, because I'm going with two different groups to each of those two shows I'm going to. So I'm just going to kind of because I've gotten to see Something Corporate up close now, I feel fulfilled in that respect. I think I'm just going to kind of go at it from a more social perspective and be like, what do you guys want to do? Okay, we'll stand up there if you want. We'll stand back here if you want. It doesn't matter to me. So, and I'm usually pretty flexible with that. My main concern at all concerts for me, and especially when I go with my wife, because she's shorter than I am, is can we see the stage? Because if we can't see, that just kind of ruins it. So,
and I'm not a very tall individual either. So, but it was nice because everybody was similarly heighted, and the heights went higher behind me, so that's all good. You can be taller behind me all you want.
Right. Definitely. I think the weather was iffy. We've talked a lot about weather, but I'll just make this maybe one final statement from my end anyway. I don't know how you felt, but I was unsure of whether the show was going to go on right up until the moment they came out, because I was like, is it going to storm again? Are we going to have lightning? Are they going to call it? Are they going to send us away? Just because there'd been so much rain, and the sky just kept darkening and then lightening and then darkening again. So I was a little worried.
It definitely gave me immediate flashbacks to last year, Four Chord, where it was okay, they're supposed to start, but are they actually going to come out? Are they actually going to come out?
Right. That's exactly how I was feeling. So I wasn't going to get too excited until the moment the guys walked on stage. So I forgot to ask you this earlier, so I'll ask now. Before we talk about the set list, were there specific songs that you went into the show and you were like, that's a song I hope they play tonight?
I never get too hung up on it. I knew they were kind of going to stick to the bigger hits or the bigger fan favorites for the most part, but as a little bit of a giveaway is I love Straw Dog. That's one of my favorites. There's a lot of favorites, which I'll get to when we get to the end. But I love Straw Dog. Me and the Moon is another one that I always love hearing. And then the other two that I thought maybe would be good contenders are The Astronaut and Good News. Because I figured they'd stick since it was a festival. So I think they're doing a little bit of a shorter set list than the rest of the Out of Office tour, if I had to guess. So I was thinking they'd stick with things that were a little bit more upbeat and energy, since they were limited on time, and just wanted to fit in as much as possible to appeal to as many people as possible with a festival type set list.
For sure. I mean, if something corporate had hits, that's what they're going to play.
Yes.
Like if you consider those hits, that's what they're going to play. They're going to play the singles, the fan favorites. That was clear to me. And surprisingly to myself, I looked at set lists because I was so excited about the SoCo weekend in June. You know, I had friends at all three of the shows, in the New York shows, at the Philly show. So I knew I'd be hearing from them. So I basically gave in ahead of time. I was like, I know I'm going to know the set list ahead of time. And like you said, I knew going into Four Chord that they're going to play the quote unquote hits and fan favorites. And I could pretty much predict sort of what they were going to play. There was maybe some surprises on there, but I could pretty much predict. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to look at the set list because they're definitely not going to play all of them. And for example, I think they played 20 or 21 songs at some of the shows over the weekend. And I looked at the set list. We got 13 songs. So, and I kind of could have expected that. I honestly expected a shorter set. So one thing I was surprised and really excited for is when they kept playing songs, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're playing for longer than I expected, and they're playing more songs than I even expected. I guess I had my expectations set low in terms of time. I just thought we'd get like 10 or less songs, and they just kept playing songs. So
yeah, same.
So they came out, they opened with Space, which was not surprising. That's what I saw them open with in Las Vegas back last fall. And they played that at the When We Were Young festival as well. I think both days. Not surprising at all for them to come out to that song. Are you a fan of that song?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just like a classic high energy, great SoCo pop punk song. Like, I feel like there's nobody that dislikes that song, you know?
Right. Yeah, I haven't met a person yet that doesn't like that song. That's a SoCo fan. Yeah. I felt the energy surge in the crowd when they came out. And I think it was like simultaneously the excitement of them coming out and playing a song that we love, but also that relief, like, oh my God, it's happening. And there's just like this surge of energy in the crowd. And that's a good reason to be up in the crowd like that. But also probably the reason we all go to concerts, right? Like
yes.
to feel that crowd energy.
Yeah. And of course, just, you know, the whole actually seeing something corporate as the full band together again is the other, like, okay, they're actually performing, but like they're actually performing. Like you and I have seen versions of these songs performed by Andrew with his other bands throughout the years, but to actually see the original guys out there was just so surreal and so cool. And, you know, one of my favorite things, I think, was just seeing their, like, everybody, like I was watching Josh and Will, and, you know, everybody's faces, like, they legit looked like they were having fun.
Definitely. Oh, I want to go back to what you talked about with the songs that you were, you know, you would hope to see or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned several songs they didn't play. But you also said that you don't get too wrapped up in that. So is that a disappointment, or is it kind of like whatever? Like, I'm still getting to see something corporate?
For me, it's like a whatever. I'm still getting to see something corporate, and we'll get to it at the end. But I feel like I'm not going to see any other Something Corporate Out of Office tour. Maybe. I probably am not, but if a ticket opportunity presents itself, I'll consider it. But for the cruise, I feel like I'll get a very more immersive experience. So I'm really just there for whatever comes up, and I don't get too hung up on if a song doesn't get played, because I have seen him so many times, and one of the other wonderful things is there will probably be an opportunity to see him in the future with just how he tours and everything. So I don't get too upset.
There were several songs on the set that I typically, and maybe this goes back to the whole like wilderness, seeing them by the wilderness versus seeing them by the original band who played them. There were several songs that I got really into that I didn't expect to get that into, that I've seen before. I've seen the Wilderness perform these songs a few times. But so I Want to Save You is one that the Wilderness doesn't normally play. So I was super excited to see that one. That was the second track that they play, the second song they played in the set. And To me, I think that would have been a little bit of a better opener, but I was just as happy to hear it when they played it. So I love that song.
Yeah, I do too. I think they went with Space just to get the energy going, but I can see why you would say that I Want to Save You is a better opener, because it just like has a more mellow start and then kind of expands on itself. But the third one that they played, She Paints Me Blue, I was not expecting that.
I was not at all. Like, for a punk/pop punk festival, I didn't expect them to pull out. It's not a ballad per se, but like just kind of slower jam, if you will. I don't know what else to call it. That was surprising. And if they were going to do that, did we have the same thing in mind? I know other people in the audience talked about it. Why did they play Me in the Moon?
Well, yeah, we talked about it at the end, because that is one of my, as I said earlier, Me in the Moon is one of my favorites, and I feel like that is usually the go-to one. That's like the fan favorite. I feel like that's kind of the more melodic jam, and I'm really surprised that didn't make this playlist. And I don't know, maybe it was just to give it a break. Maybe it was like they said, to change Atlanta to Pittsburgh for the sake of the touring. Who knows? Yeah,
I mean, it was cool to hear. I'm sure he enjoyed singing Pittsburgh Started Raining on Me. But still, like, to sing about the moon, and like, I know I've seen him play that song at outdoor shows before. And he looks up, and everybody like screams "Me in the Moon," she said. So that was surprising. Another one, while I'm on that topic, Watch the Sky. Like, that seems like it would have been appropriate.
Yeah, those were both of the bracelets I was wearing. He didn't sing either of them. And I love Watch the Sky, and I think we both put those lyrics in our respective posts about it, where, some days all I do is watch the sky. I put like, I think I could use a break, but today was a good day. Like, it was a good day at the end of it. I'm shocked that one didn't make it.
Yeah, it's just kind of ironic that the two songs that I would have said, if it's an outdoor concert and there's storms, these are the songs that he's got to play because they have the references. Exactly. But they have the set list determined way ahead of time, I'm sure. Yeah. But so I like the choices they made. I'm perfectly okay with it for the, as we talked about. But they did play Straw Dog, and that was on your list, right?
Oh, that's one of my favorites. It's just such a fun, I don't know, there's something just a little different about it. And it's not quite a fan favorite, but it's also not quite a B-side, and I really enjoy that song.
But it's an album track. It wasn't a single. It wasn't used to promote anything at any point.
Exactly.
People seem to love it. It's one of those kind of heavier hitters from their first studio album. So I really enjoyed that. Hearing that one and then Fall back to back was pretty amazing. Fall is one of my all-time Something Corporate favorite songs. So
that's a great one too. I mean, I do think that those were well stacked. Yeah.
Yeah, so that, after She Paints Me Blue, not that I didn't enjoy She Paints Me Blue, by the way. I do love that song as well, but I feel like the energy surged back up with Straw Dog and Fall as well. Yeah. Again, I'll say I was surprised. I was surprised at the choice of Kavanaugh Park. I know it's a fan favorite. A lot of people love that song.
It is a fan favorite, but it does, it brings the energy back down. We were really roller coastering with the energy.
We were.
This playlist.
If you look at the set list, we really were going up and down and up and down. So.
And I mean, it's a beautiful song. It's a beautiful song. I love it. But yeah, it's just, again, up and down, because then the next two were brought the next four, I guess. Well, the next whole set, I guess all of them. I love Only Ashes too. That's a great energy song. Like, the lyrics of it are just so good. I know, most of your podcast is about each song individually and the lyrics, but when I think about that song, and I just, like, the sulfur's so clear and fire's a beautiful sound, I'm just like, who writes? Like, that's amazing.
So Josh wrote that song. I would love to get Josh back and talk about that song and hear what he has to say about it. And so I feel like he likes that song because they've played it, I think, at every SoCo show since they've come back together, except the short set at the festivals last year. But so I feel like they really like that song, and I love it too. I hesitated on this decision, but so I don't take full song videos often. But I have been trying to take one song, like I'll pick one song and I'll record that one song emotionally or whatever you want to call it I'll step outside the concert for a moment and I'll just
Yeah.
like take video and be like, okay, I'll have this one for me and for anybody else who wants to see it. So I can remember what this all sounded like. And so that was so I chose Only Ashes kind of in the moment. And during it, I was like, I really want to jump right now. I want to like jump around and get crazy for this song. But I chose to record it. But again, my thought that I'm going to see the show again and I will go nuts for Only Ashes the next 2 times like I did in Vegas last year. So I kind of took that moment to like watch the crowd and see everybody else like going nuts, see Andrew come out into the crowd. That was the moment he came out into the crowd.
Yes.
Which honestly didn't make for a great video because like I couldn't see him a good part of the time, but it didn't matter. Like whatever. Again, I don't care too much about taking the videos, but I like to do it just so I can remember what it sounded like. I don't know if he came into the crowd, right? He just came up to the barricade.
He came up to the barricade. Yeah.
Yeah, and he went to stage right, then stage left. And then in the middle, I think he came out too. So, but he didn't do any crowd surfing or like coming out into the crowd this time for whatever reason. And that's okay. Like, I don't need him to do that, but probably would have been hard to get back.
Yeah, I would imagine so with how it was set up.
Ruthless was maybe one of my favorites of the set. That was the next song after Only Ashes. So that was a great back-to-back combination because you may have heard I'm a huge North fan. That whole album is just golden to me. And those 2 songs are prime examples. Ruthless sounded so good. And again, I think I'm always seeking out the songs that I haven't seen too much or that I have never seen in concert. And those kind of songs like Only Ashes and Ruthless, the Wilderness really doesn't play.
They don't.
In their kind of rockin' songs, guitar heavy, to see that one performed, all the guys in the band playing that song was really exciting to me. Josh was kind of going nuts on guitar in both of those songs.
Yeah.
And then Clutch was having a good time as well, kind of dancing around. I always love seeing that with when they're having fun like that.
I agree, and I love Ruthless too. Like that is a great I think that's one of the songs that if you asked for like me to pick like my top 5, like what defines Something Corporate as a band, I think that's one that would make the cut because there's just such a good mix of the lyrics, the musicality of it, both like with Andrew and with like it not being too, like you said, hard rock. Like it's a harder rocking song, but it's not one of their crazy big ones. It has that good balance.
I like the way you put that, a good balance. It does. And I think I'd never heard anybody say that about Ruthless before, but I have to agree with you. It's a great representation of the kind of music they make and the band that they are. Because you've got the verses, the melodic verses, and the strong vocals. You've got the great lyrics. There's amazing lyrics in that song. And then it does get a little bit heavy, but not like, they're not a hard rock band. They're not like a punk band. But they get a little heavy in the choruses. And yeah, so it's a nice balance, like you said. Now, the next song was Punk Rock Princess. And that's one of those that I was referring to earlier that I wasn't expecting to enjoy that song as much as I did because I've heard it several times in concert from the Wilderness and whatnot.
That's definitely a commonly played one with the Wilderness. Like I've heard it several times, and but it's just a classic song. But it did hit different with the guys up there. It really did.
I love watching the artists react to the crowd. And also watching the people around me react to the artists. And there was just, like I said, this surge of energy that I've mentioned a couple of times happening in that audience. And I'm sure it was a combination of being outside all day and being through the elements, but also being so excited. And, Pittsburgh didn't get an out-of-office tour show because this was Pittsburgh's show, the festival. And I think Something Corporate really acknowledged that as a band. They were like, this is their shot for all these people to come and see us. In those moments, it felt like everyone there was there to see Something Corporate. Now, I know we were up close, so that's what it felt like, but I'm sure there was something different going on in the very back, but it just felt like everyone was there for Something Corporate in that moment.
I agree completely.
So we did get Hurricane. That was not at all unexpected, but also a great song. Yeah, usually that's the one he comes out for. So he changed it up a little bit. I don't have a whole lot to say about Hurricane, but I do love the song, of course. I don't think Something Corporate could play a show without that song.
I mean, that and Punk Rock Princess back to back, they're like a guaranteed two songs you're going to hear at any Something Corporate, yeah.
And then I Woke Up in a Car. Similarly, you can't have a Something Corporate show without I Woke Up in a Car.
No, you really can't.
And that's another one I've seen. I think Andrew McMahon has played that song every time I've seen him as The Wilderness, every single one.
I think so too.
But I don't get sick of it, so I'm good. And that was the very first song I ever covered on this show, actually.
Was it?
For a good reason, yeah. I think it's, I think maybe like Ruthless, I'll say, I feel like it represents the band well and actually represents Andrew McMahon's music well.
I would tend to agree with you. I feel like that song has kind of, so to speak, stood the test of time, right? Like, I feel like it still fits in all of his iterations of his projects. There it is.
Yeah. What is your opinion of Constantine? So for the most part, people I talk to that are Andrew fans love Constantine, but I've heard some opposite opinions. So what is your feeling on Constantine in general?
I'm a Constantine fan. My name is Constance as my full name. So with that being said,
I didn't realize how I didn't realize how close your name was to it.
Very close. So for that reason, I do have a little bit of a soft spot for it. And I mean, it's a beautiful song. I mean, it's an almost 10-minute beautiful ballad, and the writing and the lyrics of it, the way it flows is beautiful. That being said, like I understand historically why he hasn't played it, because it is so long and it does take up so much time, and when you're at a punk pop rock show, you're not always there for an almost 10-minute ballad, even though it is a fan favorite and people are screaming Constantine. I've heard it in full twice before this one, in very different times of his performances. So one was still like right in between Jack's Mannequin and Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness, and then one was much more recently, and then this one. That being said, I was really surprised that they played it here, and I think it goes back to what you said, which is like, this is Pittsburgh's out of office tour, because with even the time they were allotted to like take 10 minutes to play that in a festival setting, I was really shocked that they chose to do that. But I do think it's for the reason you said.
Yeah, and that's when it became really evident to me. I was like, well, they're playing this nearly 10-minute ballad at a pop punk show, but it is the people who live here, it's their Something Corporate show. So it did make sense. I wasn't upset about it at all. In fact, I don't dislike Constantine. I quite enjoy it. I've seen it several times in concert, but I'm usually glad to see it. I really enjoy singing along to it, and I like what it does to the crowd. I like that it calms us. It makes for like a calm, like a lot of people are singing along. It's just kind of like one of those magical communal moments in a concert for me. So I was excited to see it. So actually I took the opportunity to just kind of do like a crowd shot around the people behind me.
Nice.
And it was just short. It was like 20 or 30 seconds, but I just thought it was kind of cool to see all of these people presumably enjoying this song, whether they were singing along or just like standing calmly. Nobody dances during Constantine. Nobody moshes during Constantine. Right. Nobody jumps up and down during Constantine. You just stand and listen. But it's a pretty special moment in concert, so I enjoy that. And I've heard the opposite argument. It's like, well, we could have gotten 2 or 3 other Something Corporate songs, but yeah, I mean, but that's a special one. It's a special one to a lot of people.
It is. It's a special one, and especially because, he wasn't against it, but like, it doesn't get played a lot. I think it's just very special that they are choosing to bring it back for this tour. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
Right. And then so after Constantine ended, they brought the energy right back up, like we talked about, like a roller coaster, and they busted into If You See Jordan. Honestly, not one of my favorite Something Corporate songs, but I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I was like, this is really exciting right now to see this song. And it made me like the song a little bit more, like sometimes concerts do.
I thought it was a really fun way to end the set, because after Constantine, too, you couldn't pick more opposite songs.
Right.
You could
Yeah.
not pick more opposite songs than a love
Musically,
ballad
lyrically,
and a diss
energy.
track. Like it
Yeah.
was, and
Yeah.
just how he ends with the jumping on the piano, and that he still does that, and everybody just kind of rocking out to the climax of the end of the song. There, it was just so fun. Like again, not necessarily my favorite, not one that I would like recommend people to listen to. Like it's not in that
Right.
top five I'm
Yeah.
saying about, but I'm like, if you want a fun song to listen to, yeah, go for this one. So I'm glad they ended with that.
Agreed. Yeah, it was a fun way to end it, like you said. So they didn't have to do an encore or anything, any goofy thing like walking off the stage and coming back because it was a festival and they had a short amount of time. So I feel like they got a lot of songs in, including the 10-minute
Yeah.
song. So it's just like if you total up all the time on, and I haven't, of course. I think they played for over an hour. I'm just gonna guess. I don't really know. I don't know what the time was that night at all. Like because I wasn't looking at my phone too much, just because it was very wet and there was a lot of energy. But so I don't even know how long they played for. But I felt like it was a while, and I was very happy with the set length. I honestly, when it ended, I was like, oh, I wish they'd play 5 more. I really wasn't.
No.
I was like, yeah, that was good.
No. I just looked at the set times from the listing, and it looks like they were slated for an hour of time.
I thought so, but
Yeah.
it felt longer than an hour, but it felt like a good amount of time. I'll just put it that way. But I guess an hour makes sense because when they play for an hour and a half at their headliner sets, they play like 20 songs. So that probably lines
Yeah.
up. Wow. So we went, I usually don't go through the entire set list, but I thought it'd be cool to kind of talk through each song and hopefully I didn't bore anybody too much with like, step by step through every single song. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm kind of a set list nerd, but I'm also a set list avoider during concerts. So I'll probably put like a little, what do you call it, warning on the episode description, set list spoilers. But with the way these shows are spaced out, I don't think anybody can really avoid set lists or, like unless they just don't look at anything Andrew McMahon for months at a time, which I guess there's people like that out there, sure, but not like me. I didn't feel too badly like going through the whole set list or looking at set list ahead of time or talking about set list this time or sharing videos this time because again, the next shows weren't for another month and then another month apart after that point. The way they're doing the tour, I almost feel like other bands could almost take a tip if it's doable. I don't know if it's financially feasible for a lot of artists to do it this way, but it kind of makes sense just to do like weekend jaunts out to different regions.
Regionally, yeah.
So I don't know. I wonder if anybody's going to kind of take a cue from that, or if it again logistically and financially makes sense for other artists to do. I don't know. So I think we've already covered this, but I'll ask it anyway. Are there songs that you were like, oh, I wish they would have played that, and I hope they play it when I see them later this year?
Probably the big two that I hope they see, other than the ones I mentioned, are Forget December, which I think would fit better when it's closer to December. And
Sure.
then Letters to Noel is one of my other
Oh,
favorites.
that's a bucket list one for me. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would love to hear that one live. Actually, both of those would work for me as well. Break Myself is always on my list. This is of no surprise to anybody who's ever listened to the show, but Break Myself is the one at like
That's a
the
good
white
one.
whale, the one I'm waiting for. I did hear Andrew in a live stream say he'll think about it for the latter half of the tour.
Okay.
I don't know what his hang up is with that song, why he doesn't want to play it or whatever, but got to respect the artist who creates their own set lists and has every reason for doing so, and that's fine, and I will respect whatever they choose. So overall, based on your two experiences at Four Chord, if your favorite artists were coming back to Four Chord, would you go again?
I think so. I think I would. Because it has a good energy overall. You can't control the weather.
Right.
And I really don't have many other complaints of what happened that day. It was hot. You can't do anything about that. It rained. You can't do anything about that.
Right. No organizer can stop either of those things from happening.
Yeah. So I think, like, maybe, if they choose to do it at Carrie Furnace again, just figuring out infrastructure a little. I mean, I don't think they did a bad job, but I think with, like, the shade and just providing
Yeah.
that kind of stuff to people. But I think if the lineup was right, I'd pay the money.
Yeah. Same. I've enjoyed Four Chord for 3 years in a row now, but I've had such incredibly different experiences at each one. I went for both days 2 years ago, and I enjoyed both days a lot. I actually I won free tickets that year somehow.
Oh, nice.
It was amazing, yeah. And then I took my buddy with me because I had 2 free tickets, and we stayed in a hotel. And then that was the year of Jimmy Eat World and Bad Religion. There was some more like heavier. Oh, All Time Low was there too. Yeah, so it was a pretty good lineup. And then last year I went the one day. We talked about what happened there, so everybody knows what happened there. And then this year was the one day, but I really enjoyed what we did get to see, and I feel like we got to see most of the show. And so I do like the setup. I like the 2 stages next to each other. You can move back and forth if you want. Again, if you don't commit yourself to the front of one, you can move pretty easily between them at both venues, I found. I much prefer, I said this earlier, but I'll say it again, I much prefer Wild Things Park in Washington, PA. I understand like the cool factor isn't there with being in the city of Pittsburgh and being at a ballpark, but hey, functionally, logistically, it was a good time. I'm wondering if the whole weather coming through and all the frantic running of concert goers, I wonder if we tore up their field a little too much. Like maybe they weren't invited back. I don't know. It's just a guess.
Maybe.
And I do know they were playing that weekend. I did check their schedule, so obviously it didn't work. But I don't know why Four Chord has changed its date so significantly each year. So it used to be in September up until year 8, which is the first year I went. And then it was August last year.
Yeah.
And then it was June this year. And I'm like, why? I wish it would just be consistent. I actually really like the September date, and I would take that again in a heartbeat. So we had no weather issues there. It wasn't too hot. If it were my vote, I would say September at Wild Things was the perfect time and place. But I will probably go back to Four Chord. Even if there's bands that I'm mildly interested in, I think I like the festival enough to go back. And I don't go to a lot of festivals, so that's kind of saying a lot from my perspective.
Yeah, I think it has a niche in the music genres that it supports, and I think that's the thing that's nice for me too as a local, that I can get all of those flavors and not have to go to Lollapalooza or Bonnaroo or somewhere else, Austin City Limits, somewhere, big and far and expensive, that I can just get it in Pittsburgh. So if the lineup's right, whether it's Carrie Furnace or Wild Things Park, you'll probably see me there next year.
Cool. Let's talk real briefly about what's coming up. So you said that you don't have any plans to go to any out-of-office dates in other states, understandably.
Not at this point.
Not at this point.
Not at this
so
point.
You're saying maybe.
If a ticket to Cleveland showed up last minute, I would consider making the drive. So I'll probably keep an eye on I work both days. I work very early the day of the concert, and I work second shift the next day. So, could I swing it? Yes. It'll depend on how I feel in the moment. But no, otherwise, no other out-of-office tickets in my possession at this time. But as far as other shows, I am going to see the Foo Fighters in a couple weeks.
Oh, cool. Where's that at?
That's in Hershey. That was the closest they're playing. So I'm meeting up with one of my girlfriends who is actually going to be on the Holiday from Real cruise with me for that one. So I'm pretty excited about that, and to touch base with her and to start planning for that. And then the following week is Hosier at Star Lake in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, you mentioned him to me at the concert, and I was like, I didn't even know he was still touring. I didn't know, but that's cool. Kind of know who he is and know his music, but I don't know too much about him, so that's cool. But I'm also amazed he's playing such a big venue.
It's sold out. It's completely sold out.
Okay, did not know that he was so popular.
I would recommend giving him a listen. I mean, there's a couple songs that are radio popular, but
that's probably all.
But
I'll give him a listen.
It's good energy. And then in September, I have Dashboard Confessional. So,
all right,
always a great time.
Yeah, I just finished reading a book about the early 2000s emo scene called Nothing Feels Good, and there was a heavy focus. It was by a journalist, and he went to several shows with Dashboard and had got to hang out on his bus and interview him over and over again. And so it was heavily focused on Dashboard for a couple chapters, and it made me want to go see Dashboard so bad again. But the night they're playing Columbus, I will be in Detroit seeing something corporate. So I
remember you said that.
Yeah, so that's like not going to happen. And I looked at
Yeah.
all their tour dates, all Dashboard's tour dates this fall, and nothing is going to work in my schedule. And let's face it, being that I'm going on holiday from Real and Cleveland and Detroit for SoCo, and I went to Pittsburgh recently, I can't travel for any more concerts. Like I just
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
So I gotta stop
Sometimes
somewhere.
you got to be like, I got to set a limit. I got to set a limit somewhere, right?
But let's talk holiday from real quick. So you are going with a friend of yours from PA then?
Yeah, I have two friends from PA that are coming.
Two.
One
Okay.
is from Pittsburgh area originally. She lives in Philly now. The other is from where I used to work in central Pennsylvania, and they've never met. But
Oh,
they're
cool.
my two Andrew McMahon concert buddies when I'm not forcing my sister to go with me or going by myself. And they both were like, "Yeah, let's go." And so we're all in the same little cabin, and I think I am just getting more like this four chord concert and seeing something corporate got me even more excited for the Holiday from Real cruise. I don't know about you, but
Oh yeah, for sure.
so, and I think it's going to be like unlike anything I've ever done as a vacation concert experience, etc. Like it just feels like it's going to be so unique, and it's just such a
Hmm.
specific thing for like Andrew fans.
Not only to see the artists we love, but also be around so many other people who feel the same way is I just think like an energy that will not be able to be contained.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, in other Andrew news, just real quick here, we've got Death Grip that was just dropped right before Four Chord. He has announced that another song, Happy, is being released in August, and I'm excited to hear that next song as well. I've been streaming Death Grip a lot, but yeah, lots to be excited about as an Andrew fan this year for sure. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your experience. And it was great getting to know you. And I'll be seeing you and your friends on the Holiday from Real cruise. And that'll be a really unique and interesting thing for your two Andrew McMahon friends that have never met to come together all as one and just kind of bring that world together. I'm
Yeah.
excited for you.
Yeah, it's gonna be an exciting time. I'm really looking forward to it. But it was so nice to talk to you. Thank you so much for having me. This was
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. And again, thanks for saying hi at the concert. I had a great time.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll see you on the cruise. And I don't know, maybe just maybe I'll see you at that Cleveland show. But if not, I'll understand, and then I'll see you a couple months later. So
Sounds good.
all right,
Thank you so much, Steve.
all right. Thanks so much for being on the show.